Welcome to Say More from Boston Globe Opinion. I'm Shirley Leung. Boston was in the national spotlight this week.
The hearing on the Committee of Oversight and Government Reform will come to order. Want to welcome everyone here today.
Mayor Michelle Wu, along with 3 other mayors, was called before Congress to testify about the city's immigration policy, our so-called sanctuary city status. The topic was whether local police should cooperate with federal immigration officers. Republicans argue that when police aren't working closely with ICE, cities are less safe. These blue city mayors disagree. In these type of hearings, the main goal on both sides is political theater, getting your points in while the cameras roll.
Every year since I took office, we've set a new record low for gun violence in Boston. Last year, Boston saw the fewest homicides on record in the last 70 years. Those are the facts.
Mayor Wu certainly also took her shots.
Our local community knows best, and we can tell you in Boston, over our history, it has not been the word of presidents or kings or presidents who think they are kings that set what happens. It is our residents.
Today, I'm joined by Jim Puzzanghera, who is a national political reporter for the Boston Globe. He was in the room where it happened. He says from the get-go, Michelle Wu stood out from the rest of the mayors for being calm and collected, even bringing her 7-week-old baby with her.
About 10 minutes before the hearing, Michelle Wu comes in, carrying her infant daughter in a pink onesie, sits down at the witness table, and then puts a blanket over her shoulder and starts nursing her baby right there. And it just struck me that she seemed very calm for what was coming, for the storm that was coming.
That storm lasted 6 hours, and Jim's takeaway is that Wu was on her A game.
She was well prepared, and I think she felt very prepared. She was very confident throughout the hearing, where the other mayors were in different levels of defensive for various reasons. She did not come off as defensive.
Yeah, I mean, she did have a $950 an hour law firm help her prepare. I think she's been preparing for weeks. And I mean, what do you think heading into this hearing? I mean, what do you think were her goals? What did she want to accomplish? And did she succeed?
Yeah, I think her goal, and she stated it flatly a couple times, I think, but was to stand up for the city and its policies, stand up for immigrants and the importance of immigrants to the city of Boston, narrowly, and to the country as a whole. She wanted to state, hey, this is what we're doing. You say it's not safe. We're actually the safest major city in the country. You say immigrants are bad, or at least undocumented immigrants are bad. We say immigrants have made this city. Immigrants were on the 2004 Red Sox. Immigrants, are at Boston's very core since its founding. So I think that's what she wanted to do, and I think she did. She stood up for herself when she needed to. She would answer questions directly, but she also fought back in ways that the other mayors did not.
I mean, I feel like she prepared like this was a presidential debate, right? She came with one-liners. I mean, one moment that was incredibly memorable, and it was at the very beginning of the hearing, was when she was asked about Tom Homan, right? The border czar, who a few weeks ago, he's like, I'm going to come to Boston. I'm going to bring hell.
I read a story last night. The police commissioner of Boston. You said you doubled down on not helping the law enforcement officers of ICE. I'm coming to Boston. I'm bringing hell with me.
What was it like being in the room and hearing her response to a question about Homan?
Yeah, well, you knew that was coming, obviously, because Homan had said it a couple of weeks ago. It's been out there in the ether. You knew she was going to get asked about it or have an opportunity to respond.
Let's talk about Tom Homan. Shame on him for lying about my city, for having the nerve to insult our police commissioner who has overseen the safest Boston's been in anyone's lifetime. Bring him here under oath and let's ask him some questions.
She didn't just criticize him, but she she tried to belittle him, to try to say this is beneath the way somebody should handle this job. And she did it, her style is she's not loud, she's direct, but she did it with sort of a moral, certitude behind it. I thought it was one of her best moments there, and she had a lot of really good moments, and you can't really say that about the other mayors.
So the Republicans held this hearing because they wanted to portray these four Democratic mayors, as providing kind of some kind of safe harbor to undocumented immigrants who have committed serious crimes, right? So after 6 hours, did the Republicans succeed in getting that message across?
It's hard to tell. I mean, I think it was kind of an even split here. As you know, immigration is a very complex issue, and when you try to distill it into a black and white, talking point, like these cities' policies make these cities less safe, make their residents less safe. On one level, that's a very complicated issue, how you handle, civil immigration enforcement versus criminal. The one ace in the hole that these mayors had, and Mayor Wu had the biggest part of them all, was that crime has actually been going down in these cities.
That's right.
Homicides have been going down. I mean, it's part of a broader national trend. So the general point that Republicans kept making is that you're making your cities less safe. The mayors all responded, well, crime is down, homicides are down, violent crimes are down. And Wu, I mean, she said it 4 times in her opening statement. Boston is the safest major city in the country, according to the statistics that they're pointing to from the Major Cities Police Chiefs Association. So in that way, they kind of muted that main Republican point.
I mean, in many ways, Michelle Wu was the wrong mayor to be hauled out in front of a congressional hearing on this topic, because Boston is, probably the safest big city in America, and it's one that's actually gotten incredibly more safe on her watch. Now, but the one thing that did worry me for all the mayors listening to the Republicans, I mean, it's almost like, I mean, they were desperate to create like a viral moment, just like they did with the university presidents, with, Harvard's Claudine Gay, and, who eventually did lose her job over her, in part because of her poor performance in front of a congressional committee in 2023. But they threatened to send the Department of Justice after them, and to say that they are not they are violating some kind of federal law in not having their local police department cooperate with ICE, right? I mean, do you think the Republicans are serious about doing that?
Yeah, well, I think you have to take that seriously, given the environment we're in, because the Trump administration has put loyalists in the Justice Department. President Trump was clear during the campaign that he was looking for retribution. So whether an investigation, a criminal investigation, would result in any kind of criminal charges is one thing, but the ability to have that investigation and the complications that would cause for these mayors and their cities is something you can't rule out. And also you have to be concerned about what the chairman, James Comer, said before the hearing, and what he told a bunch of us afterwards, which was they may look to withhold federal funds to these cities, which is something that's completely within the purview of Congress. He wasn't committing to that, but he didn't seem convinced after the hearing that these mayors were cooperating fully with ICE, at least in the way that the Trump administration wants them to be, which is to essentially be deputized as immigration officers, which is being done in some Republican cities and some Republican states.
So, as you know, it's a mayoral election year up here in Boston.
Yeah.
Mayor Wu is running for re-election. And so, I mean, I'm thinking, I mean, this was a make or break moment for her, right? What do you think was going through her mind? I mean, you think she was thinking about her re-election, and how well she did or didn't do would affect her re-election?
I mean, that had to be part of the calculation. In number one, in accepting the invitation, right, to look like I'm not afraid to go to Washington and stand up for what I believe in, what my policies are. And then also knowing that there would be this much attention on it. She came down here, there was a press conference the day before the hearing. There was a lot of Boston media that came down. So she knew that there was going to be a big spotlight on how she performed. And I think she wanted to show that she was standing up for the city, and that her policies have been successful. The crime decline being one of them. She was also, at one point, Representative Byron Donalds from Florida was criticizing her for not having a number for how much money has been spent by Boston on undocumented immigrants. And she said, well, we don't track that. And he's like, you don't track that? How do you run a budget? That's ridiculous. And she shot right back. We have a AAA rating, AAA bond rating. So at any point that she was both standing up for the city and standing up for her policies, which she was asserting have made the city a safer, better place.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Wu hasn't, she says she's running for a re-election, but she hasn't, she doesn't have an official kickoff yet. But I felt like this was basically the official kickoff for her. I mean, she was on this national stage. She really knocked it out of the ballpark by many accounts. And people were, her team was smartly so. Maybe some people thought it was crass, but I think it was smart to fundraise. I mean, during the hearing, her campaign was sending out fundraising emails, and people were responding. There was an Emerson College poll out last week, and she was a bit underwater under approval ratings. I assume the next time that poll comes out, I think she's going to be above water. I think this hearing will help her approval rating because she represented Boston really well.
Yeah. I mean, it's a rallying cry, right? I mean, it goes back to David Ortiz after the marathon bombing, right?
Right.
It's sort of her version of "this is our effing city," right?
Yeah.
You even
and
saw
that was the last line. That was the last line of her opening remarks. This is our city, right?
Yeah. She just left out the expletive, and you saw that with Josh Kraft too, being at that rally that was supportive of Wu. I mean, it's hard. From a political standpoint, she had a lot to lose by coming down here, but she had a lot to gain if it went well, in that she's standing up for the city. She's standing up to Trump. She's standing up to Republicans, and we know how much frustration there is amongst a lot of Democrats outside of Washington that hasn't been going on inside of Washington. So it was a big opportunity for her. And if you're her opponent, you can't really criticize anything that she did in that regard.
I just want to end on Boston, how Boston is viewed in Trump's Washington these days. I mean, do you see the city? Do you think the city will continue to be singled out at these types of hearings? Do you think Wu or even Healy? Do you think will have to kind of buckle up for more time in the national spotlight?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Boston stands out. It's one of the bluest cities in the country. It's liberal. It's known to Republicans as that. Boston is a convenient punching bag for Republicans. It just screams liberal, progressive, all the things that MAGA stands against. But this may maybe lead them to think that maybe Michelle Wu isn't, the best foil in some of these situations.
Jim Puzzanghera is a national political reporter for the Boston Globe. Thank you for coming on Say More.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, so that was the scene in Washington. But what about here in Boston?
So whose city? Our city. Whose city? Our city. I have another one. Say it loud and say it clear. Immigrants are welcome here.
During the hearing, more than 100 people rallied outside City Hall to support the mayor and Boston's pro-immigrant policies. The events of the day made me wonder, how do undocumented immigrants feel about what's happening right now? So I called up Globe opinion columnist Marcela García, who covers immigration policy. I asked her, do these hearings matter at all to the people in Boston who are most affected?
Yes and no, but mostly no. I think most undocumented immigrants really don't consume the news the way you and I do. They watch their news on social media. They watch their news, in the case of many Latino immigrants, on Telemundo or Spanish language news outlet, digital outlets. But at the end of the day, Michelle Wu sent a very strong message in defense of immigrants. And I think those clips of her saying this at a national stage, it's going to trickle down to social media. And there immigrants and undocumented immigrants here are going to see on TikTok or Instagram clips of their mayor standing up for them. And I think there's value of her doing that, because they're going to get that message. Oh my God, my mayor was in Washington, D.C. standing up for us.
I mean, throughout this hearing, Republicans kept trying to paint cities like Boston, as full of immigrants who are committing crimes, and the Boston police are refusing to arrest them. And the mayors kept saying, they don't let criminals roam free in their cities. So what's the relationship between Boston police and ICE when dealing with violent crimes, involving undocumented immigrants?
So as the mayors of Denver, Chicago, and our own mayor, Michelle Wu, said repeatedly to, ad nauseum during the hearing, there is collaboration, there is cooperation between their local police departments and federal immigration enforcers, federal authorities, right? ICE agents. But the contours of those relationships, I guess, varies or rather depends a lot on what ICE is looking for, right? And so, and what are they showing? So a lot of it hinges on, for instance, a criminal warrant, right? Like if there's a criminal warrant, meaning signed by a judge, of course, the local police departments have communication with ICE, because we're talking about someone who has been charged with a crime, right? And so in Boston in particular, we have the Trust Act, which delineates the contours of that relationship. In which instances do we have a more, I guess, intense collaboration, where instances of child trafficking or criminal behavior, right? And so, but not like, local police officers cannot ask someone, what's your immigration status? Are you undocumented? It's because what these mayors want to do is to send a message to immigrant communities that they are safe coming forward and talking to the local police about crimes they may have witnessed, crimes that may have been committed against them. They can be, witnesses, they can be victims. And so if there is the perception that ICE is collaborating heavily with the police, people are not going to come forward. And that's where the trust comes in, right? It's about trust.
So the Republicans inviting Mayor Wu, and along with three other, Democratic liberal mayors, they really did this to essentially berate them over the so-called sanctuary city status. And so, you recently wrote this great column about how this term, sanctuary city, it's a bit of a misnomer.
I have been sort of stewing about this topic for a while until I realized I have to write about this, because it's inaccurate. When you think about sanctuary, the word sanctuary, and again, not to get too into semantics, because it's more than just semantics. It means that we are just going to protect or offer sanctuary to immigrants, which is not true. That's not what we're doing. That's not what these policies do. And I think it came from a very good, well-intentioned place when progressives, liberal politicians started talking about sanctuary policies, right? Like, the idea is, I think a more accurate term is welcoming policies. So it's always been a misnomer. The history of the term goes back to the 80s. It started in churches, when churches became places of sanctuary where immigrants or refugees would go for sanctuary. But in reality, in its current form, it's just taking a life of its own. And A, is inaccurate, and B, it's just being weaponized by Republicans, right? So there's this sort of huge disconnect, because again, there's no legal definition of what sanctuary city is. Like, it's really a term of art, and everyone uses it to their own purpose.
Wu, was asked to go to Washington because, Boston is, seen as friendly to undocumented immigrants. But ICE is stepping up its raids and in the region and deporting people. So what is the current state of immigration enforcement in the Boston area these days?
Well, it's very unclear because ICE as an agency has become very hard to get information from. What we do know is a handful of people, I mean, not a handful, maybe a dozen, fewer than 20 people that they have put press releases about. And those are people, criminal, they have criminal convictions or criminal warrants. But other than that, collateral arrest, we don't know for sure because they're not saying these are the number of people that we have arrested in Boston since January 20. They have not said that. They don't have the resources also to come in and say, like I said earlier, we're going to conduct a mass workplace raids. They just don't have the people to do that. But that doesn't mean that people aren't going to get scared. That doesn't mean that people are not going to be afraid to go outside, to go, again, like last month, I'm sorry, in January, there was that rumor of a raid going on in a market basket in Chelsea. And the market basket was empty for days after that rumor. And it wasn't even true. There was no raid going on. And again, people are just scared. They don't want to risk, going out and encounter an ICE officer because they just don't want to put themselves at risk. And so it's those two things can be true at once, that even if ICE lacks the resources to really, really conduct mass deportations now, people are still scared.
I mean, we was talking about this at the hearing about how people are scared. And she was saying that you can't make it's very hard. You can't have a safe city unless everyone feels safe.
And it's true because what happens is those people are not going to come forward to talk to the police if they witness a crime, or those people are not going to be able to come forward and talk to police if they're victims of a crime because they're going to be afraid of coming into contact with law enforcement, and that may put them at risk.
I think both of us agree that what happened in Washington was pure political theater. And so what could move the needle for immigrants in Boston? I mean, what are the policies or issues that you're watching most closely that really matter?
I mean, this is not a simplistic answer, but it's a tried answer. And all the mayors mentioned this during the hearing, is that the thing that could really move the needle is Congress acting on immigration reform. I mean, even Mayor Wu mentioned gun reform as well. Like, if we're talking about keeping cities safe, why don't you pass gun control? Why don't you pass immigration reform? Like, I hate to offer that answer because it's sort of like the safe, tried answer that everyone, but it's true. It's true. That is the one thing that can make a huge difference. The reason why we are where we are is Congress. And so we keep coming back to that because it's the truth, whether we don't have enough legal immigration pathways or whether because people who are already here cannot legalize their status. It's Congress. And so again, it's trite, but it's the truth. And all the mayors said this. If you really want to keep our cities safe, you would pass immigration reform.
Marcela García is a columnist for Globe Opinion. Her newsletter is Mira, is bilingual. Find a link to sign up in our show notes. Thank you, Marcela.
Thanks for having me.
Say More is a production of the Boston Globe. Today's episode was produced by Anna Kusmer. Our editor is Jim Dow. Our engineer is Zuzair Ahmed. If you like the show, please follow us and leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can email us at saymore@globe.com. I'm Shirley Leung. Thanks for listening.